Hello history fans and welcome back to the channel that helps you learn a little bit of history while you're falling asleep. I feel like maybe that needs to be the new catchphrase. I say catchphrase as if I remember to say it every time, and I don't. I'm also trialling a new mic setup. How do we feel about twinkly mic hanging in? Can you see the weird stand? Oh, you can see the weird stand it's on. That's not cute. Hang on. Maybe I'll crop it out. Anyway, a while ago I was very kindly sent this book, The Story of Witches, Folklore, History and Superstition by Willow Wincham, and I forgot to post about it on Instagram, and I feel terrible. So instead, you're going to get a YouTube video on it. So here is some tales of witches to fall asleep to. Please do like and subscribe before you do. And let's get into it. Let's just start with part one. Start at the very beginning. From Hecate to Baba Yaga. Is that how it's pronounced? Or it might be like Baba. It's not Baba Yaga. Let me Google it. Baba Yaga. The A in Baba is pronounced like the A in father. Oh, Baba Yaga. Or it might be Baba Yaga. Okay, I don't know. Is the answer that gave me multiple ways. Humankind has always loved to tell stories. Before the written word, these stories were an essential mode of communication, an intrinsic necessity in order to pass on beliefs, traditions, and warnings from one generation to the next. The first recorded fairy tale is believed to date back to 6,000 years ago, and it is clear that this is only the tip of the iceberg in our storytelling heritage. Within this tradition of myths, legends, and tales, witches have terrified, titillated, and entertained us for millennia. Passed down by word of mouth and then on into the written record, tales of witches, powerful, cunning, and often deadly, have held a timeless fascination for us. From the biblical witches of Endor to the Arthurian Morgan Le Fay, from the witch in Hansel and Gretel to Cinderella's fairy godmother, otherworldly, with supernatural powers and abilities, the witch plays many roles. A figure of fear, the end point of a quest, an enemy to overcome, a warning. Again and again, the witch confronts us through our superstitions, fairy tales, cautionary tales, and legends, holding up a mirror to us as individuals and humankind as a whole. From ancient goddesses to fairy tale stepmothers, the witch has been presented in a variety of forms, the only constant being that she is never far away. It is also through this shared body of tales that we come closest to knowing the people of the past, what our distant ancestors thought, believed, did, and feared. Through them we can glimpse how witches were viewed and treated, and the part the witch played in the minds and lives of everyday people. Goddess of Witches, the many faces of Hecate. Of all the deities of the ancient world, none can rival the Greek goddess Hecate for her position as most associated with witches and witchcraft. The goddess of darkness and magic, sacrifices and crossroads. Today, Hecate is the very embodiment of the witch, capturing the imagination of academics, writers, and members of the neo-pagan community alike. Considering her later reputation, Hecate's beginnings are surprisingly tame by comparison. The goddess's origins are not found in ancient Greece at all, and it is believed that her roots lie in Caria, a region of what is now modern-day Turkey. She was then assimilated into the Greek pantheon, and in early Greek writings, between 800 and 479 BCE, Hecate was a benign figure, not yet associated with magic and witchery. In Hesiod's Theogony, around 700 BCE, Hecate was said to be the daughter of the Titans Perses and Asteria, despite the Titans being overthrown by the Olympian gods, Zeus, their king. favoured Hecate greatly, and she received her share of honour. A benign and helpful goddess, Hecate was frequently prayed to, with many asking for her favour. The first seeds of Hecate's current identity are sown in Homer's Hymn to Demeter, written in the late 7th century or early 6th century BCE. In it, the goddess is explicitly linked to the underworld. According to the text, the tender-hearted Hecate witnessed the abduction of Persephone and became the girl's attendant to escort her from the upper to the lower world, and back again. From this point, Hecate quickly becomes established as a liminal goddess, a guide during periods of transition, and by the classical and Hellenistic periods, she became clearly associated with ghosts and magic. This Hecate strikes a terrifying figure indeed. Haunting crossroads with her hounds and glowing torches, she is at one with the shadows, a chthonic goddess of the night. I have never seen that word written down before. Chthonic. In the 1st century CE, Virgil uses Hecate's grove to describe the entrance to hell, and the goddess also came to be associated with necromancy and sorcery, further cementing her reputation. Hecate was originally portrayed as a single figure, but from the 5th century BCE was increasingly depicted as a triple goddess, with each of her 3 faces looking in a different direction. This is a reflection of her connection to crossroads and her strong association with boundaries or borders of many kinds, such as the thresholds between places, realms, or events. This further strengthened her link with the dead, as restless spirits, often those who had died before their time or in a violent and bloody manner, were said to gather at crossroads. It was believed that such spirits, and Hecate herself who ruled over them, needed to be appeased. And so, Deepna, suppers of cakes, bread, garlic and cheese, were left as offerings at crossroads for the goddess in hope that she would give protection in return. In Euripides' play Medea, dating to the 5th century BCE, Hecate is shown clearly as a patron of vengeful magic and the underworld, both furthering her connection with witches and bringing this reputation to a wider audience. Hecate is also invoked in curse tablets starting from this time, and examples include requests to bring an individual to ruin, or requesting that she, along with other deities, inflict someone with madness. Witches are often said to possess the ability to transform others, and throughout ancient writings, Hecate is linked with several instances of human into animal transformation. According to On the Characteristics of Animals by Aelian, Aelian, from around the turn of the 2nd century BCE, Hecate, incensed by the sorceress Gael, well known for her inability to control her behaviour and her unnatural sexual appetites, turns her into a foul-smelling polecat. I'm a lonesome polecat, lonesome Saturn. If any of you can name that musical, you gain 5 awesome points. Another human to polecat transformation linked to Hecate was that of Galinthias, who was transformed by the goddess Hera in punishment for her intervention during the birth of the demigod Heracles. Hera's husband Zeus had got the mortal Alcmene pregnant. Angry at her husband's infidelity, Hera instructed the Moirai, the Fates in Greek mythology, to withhold their customary help during her labour. Accordingly, the Moirai stood by the suffering woman's bedside with their arms folded, ignoring her increasing torment. Galinthias, Alcmene's friend or servant, was unable to stand the sight any longer, and tricked the Fates by saying that Alcmene had given birth to a boy. In their surprise they unfolded their arms, thus allowing Alcmene to give birth at last. For her mercy, Galinthius paid a terrible price. He returned her into a polecat. In this story, Hecate was the saviour of the piece, as she was said to have taken pity on poor Galinthius in her new form and adopted her as a servant. Hecate was also associated with dogs or hounds, and she is sometimes depicted with either a single dog or a whole pack. One tale suggests her canine companion was in fact the Trojan queen Hecabe or Hecuba. After the fall of Troy, the distraught queen leapt into the sea, seeking to end her life. There Hecate transformed her into dog form, and she remained with the goddess from then on. In modern Wicca today, Hecate is said to represent the great goddess in her crone form. She is a popular deity invoked for guidance and protection, in particular where transitions are concerned. Hecate is still associated with witchcraft, the moon, crossroads in the underworld, and rituals are performed in her name, in particular on the nights of the new moon and the Gaelic seasonal festival of Samhain. Hecate hasn't just been a source of inspiration in the art world, but also makes appearances across theatre, television, and literature. One of her earliest cameos is in one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, Macbeth. There, she is portrayed as the merciless leader of the witches. Appearing in 2 scenes, she first rebukes the 3 witches for sharing prophecies with Macbeth without her say-so, and later she returns to commend them on the spells they have cast. It is thought that Hecate may not have been an original character in the play, but that her scenes were added during the editing of the first folio, potentially by the English playwright Thomas Middleton. In more recent times, Hecate has continued to fascinate, with portrayals of the goddess varying in their degree of creative license. Among others, she is referenced in 3 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and in the 1998 film Practical Magic, and is clearly considered a powerful witch in both. In the TV show Charmed, she is portrayed as Queen of the Underworld, a figure that is more demon than goddess. In literature, Hecate appears several times throughout Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series, in which the background assigned to the goddess is largely faithful to her original roots. Let's go forward in time a bit. Ooh, this section looks fun. A discovery of witches. Suspecting a person of witchcraft was one thing, but how was it possible to find proof in order to bring them to justice? Various methods of discovery developed over the period of the witch trials, used alike by those in authority, by self-professed witch-finders who travelled from place to place, rooting out witches, and by neighbours. This says, making a witch cake. The precise origins of this intriguing method of witch detection are shrouded in mystery, with even the details of the practice not always being clear, as they varied from place to place. The basic idea was as follows. Urine from the bewitched victim was mixed with flour, and sometimes other ingredients, before being made into a cake and cooked over a fire. The resulting mixture could then be variously buried, burned, or fed to an animal, in order to either reveal the identity of the witch or to break their hold over a victim. In King's Lynn, Norfolk, at some point prior to 1617, the widowed Elizabeth Hancock was wrongly accused by Mary Smith of stealing one of her chickens. When Hancock confronted Smith and took her to task for making such accusations, Smith retaliated by wishing the pox to light upon her, and called Hancock names. A few hours after this altercation, Hancock fell ill. When her condition continued for over 3 weeks, her father consulted a wizard or cunning man, who showed him the face of the witch responsible in a glass, and gave him the following recipe. Flour to be mixed with patient's own water, urine, and baked on the hearth, 1/2 to be applied to the region of the heart, the other half to the back. The cake to be first spread with an ointment like treacle, a powder to be cast upon it, and certain words written on paper. In this instance, at least, such actions were believed to be successful, as the ill woman recovered, and the hold of the witch was said to have been broken, only for Hancock to relapse at a future point, after her new husband rashly killed Smith's cat. This all feels far too coincidental to be false. Another example comes from the diary of the Reverend Oliver Hayward of Yorkshire. An entry for 1688 relates how the troubled mother of an ill child visited him to ask for his advice. A variety of doctors had been unable to help her 12-year-old son, and a friend had brought another doctor to try and ease his suffering. This doctor declared the boy hurt by an evil tongue, and refused to treat him until his urine had been tried by fire, instructing the mother to then make a cake or loaf of it with wheat meal, and put some of his hair into it, and horseshoe stumps, and then put it in the fire. Troubled, the mother wanted to know whether it was wise to follow this suggestion. The Reverend, after consulting with another minister from the area, concluded that as the practice had no foundation in either nature or the Bible, then it was not of God, and should therefore not be attempted. Perhaps the most famous example of a witch cake comes from 1692, at the very start of the Salem witch trials. Betty Parris, the Reverend Parris's daughter, and her cousin Abigail Williams started experiencing attacks from an unseen force. Neighbour Mary Sibley asked the Parris's enslaved servant, known as John Indian, to make a witch cake. The girl's urine was duly mixed with flour and baked before being fed to the family dog. When this act came to light, the Reverend Parris was horrified, identifying the creation of the witch cake as witchcraft itself, going to the devil for help against the devil. It was due to this very act, he warned, that evil had been unleashed, and was directly responsible for the terror that followed. Interestingly, a 17th century English practice involved feeding cakes made from the suffering person's urine to a dog in order to transfer the sickness from the person to the animal via sympathetic magic, suggesting that this idea was well known on both sides of the Atlantic. Let's skip forward quite a chunk, shall we? Solitary practitioners, the way of the hedge witch. Never heard of that before. Within the first covens of modern witches, the craft was generally held to be a secret, initiatory and group experience. However, a shift occurred in the 1960s, and, particularly after the death of Gerald Gardner, the way of the witch became increasingly popular and accessible to all. From this development sprang an increasing number of solitary witches, those who, for whatever reason, chose to work alone rather than joining or forming a coven. Part of the reason for this development was the wealth of books that appeared in the following years. The writings of prominent witches such as Doreen Valiente, Zed Budapest, Starhawk, Janet and Stuart Farrar, along with Gardner himself, provided inspiration to many. We must have skipped forward to some modern witchcraft. In particular, Charles Cardell's publication of sections of Gardner's Book of Shadows shortly after his death, while controversial, meant the material could be utilised by the solitary practitioner, further aided by the full publication of Gardner's book some time later. Within the coven structure, there were also several who supported the validity of solitary practice. Among them, Doreen Valiente was an early advocate for self-initiation, where an individual makes a private profession of their belief and commitment, and some writers produce self-initiation rituals to aid this. Writer Ray Beth was among the first writers to specifically cater to the solitary witch. In her first book, Hedge Witch, A Guide to Solitary Witchcraft, published in the UK in 1990, and as The Wiccan Path, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner in the USA, was hugely influential, and the term hedge witch is used by many solitary witches today. In Beth's work, there is a focus on grounding within the cyclical seasonal celebrations of the land and the moon, along with a general emphasis on nature and spirituality. A prolific and popular writer, she has written several other books for the solitary witch, including The Hedge Witch's Way, Magical Spirituality for the Lone Spellcaster, and Spellcraft for Hedge Witches, A Guide to Healing Our Lives. Cecil Williamson, founder of the Witchcraft Research Centre and the Museum of Witchcraft, was also in favour of solitary witchcraft. He coined the term wayside witches to describe the lone witch, and said that he gathered his knowledge of magic and witchcraft from various such individuals within the West Country, which he used as the basis for own magical practice. Today, there are many books available for the solitary witch, along with a plethora of workshops, seminars and classes, available both online and in person, catering for a wide range of tastes and preferences. Being a solitary practitioner doesn't necessarily mean working alone exclusively. Some solitary witches choose to join with others at specific times, such as for certain rituals, celebrations, or meetings. Let's find some more historical ones. Ooh, from Sir Nunus to the Green Man. The museum I used to work at in St Albans had a big mosaic that was debated to be Sir Nunus, the Celtic god, woodland god, or Neptune, the Roman water god, and I always believed it was Sir Nunus. So let's read about him. 2 seconds. Within Wicca and some other neo-pagan groups, the horned god is revered by many today, in partnership with the great goddess, often depicted with horns or antlers to highlight his connection to the natural world. The horned god is the personification of male energy and the primal energy from within. Closely linked with nature and fertility, the horned god can also clearly be seen to represent the cycles of life. In some traditions, the horned god is said to be born at Yule, as the darkest half of the year begins. As the year turns, he grows to maturity, reaching his peak at midsummer, where he dies, only to be reborn again as Yule comes around once more. Some personify the two aspects as the Oak King and the Holly King. These two symbolise the shifting of the seasons as the year rolls onwards, the never-ending battle between light and darkness. The first half of the year, from Yule to midsummer, is the Oak King's domain. His growing power and vitality are reflected in the ever-strengthening power of the sun, reaching the height of his power at the midsummer solstice. He does battle with the Holly King. The Holly King, always triumphant, reigns over the next half of the year. His domain spans the months until the winter solstice, as the nights lengthen, the days darken and grow colder, and the power of the Oak King is well and truly stamped out. But all is well, as with the winter solstice, the Oak King defeats the Holly King in return, and so the cycle continues for another year. As with the great goddess, some worship and follow other aspects of the horned god. Some worship the Green Man, either in his own right as a symbol of nature, or as an aspect of the horned god. In some traditions, Wiccans incorporate him into their beliefs and practices, and he is popular throughout many pagan groups. As the name implies, the Green Man is closely associated with nature, and also the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. A guardian of the forest, the Green Man is often shown as a face surrounded by greenery, such as vines and leaves, a masculine aspect of the horned god, a symbol of the natural world. The Green Man represents the vitality of the earth. Another god or aspect, sometimes linked to the horned god, is that of Sir Nunus. This figure is also depicted as a horned figure, representing his connection with animals and the wild. And he embodies fertility and the abundance of the natural world. Believed by many to have Celtic origins, it is thought that worship of Cernunnos was likely part of ancient religious observance in Europe. Today, either as an aspect of the horned god or a deity in his own right, Cernunnos is often called upon for guidance, strength, and blessings connected to the natural world. I feel like I don't want to read too much. Should we leave it there? I don't know. Maybe one more. Okay, the Hammer of Witches, Malleus Maleficarum. Debate raged long and hard during the period of the witch trials regarding the nature of witchcraft and how exactly witches should be dealt with. Demonologists and scholars alike dedicated thousands of words to the subject, with books and pamphlets proliferating at a vast rate across Europe and beyond. There is one book, however, that today stands out in the popular imagination above all others, Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of Witches. This vitriolic, misogynistic, and explicitly detailed text acted essentially as a witch hunter's handbook, and it has been described by some as the single most important publication regarding witches and witchcraft in history. But just what is this text, and how influential has it been in the fight against witchcraft? Written by Dominican Inquisitor Heinrich Kramer, the Malleus was first published in 1486. The name of Jacob Sprenger was added to that of Kramer's in 1519, but there is ongoing debate regarding how much, if any, involvement Sprenger actually had. The lengthy work is divided into multiple sections and chapters, each addressing different aspects of witchcraft, including the identification, prosecution, and punishment of witches, detailed instructions for conducting witch trials, descriptions of supposed signs of witchcraft, and theological arguments supporting the persecution of witches. Impressively thorough, the book covers everything from how to question and torture suspects in order to extract the all-important confession, to the legalities of securing a conviction. And the book also served the purpose of spreading key ideas about witches that were to become firmly entrenched in witchcraft lore for decades to follow. It is from this text, for example, that the oft-cited idea of penis-stealing witches passed into popular discourse, along with many other descriptions highlighting the depravity and irredeemable nature of witches. As a testament to its popularity, the Malleus went through 26 editions between 1486 and 1600, and remains in print today. Although the book is often said to be the greatest influence on the witch trials and single-handedly responsible for the deaths of thousands, the truth is actually decidedly less dramatic. It has been noted by some scholars that there is no sudden escalation of trials and persecution after its publication, nor was there persecution in areas where there had been none previously. It has even been pointed out that in some areas there was a decrease in executions after the publication of the book. The Malleus Maleficarum was also condemned by leading theologians at the time for advocating procedures that were both illegal and unethical. In 1538, the Spanish Inquisition cautioned against taking the text at face value, especially some of the more obviously outlandish claims. Some have suggested that the real power of the book lay in being a focus for debate and discussion surrounding the topic of witchcraft, and likewise as a basis for further ideas and arguments to be developed. This has done little to curb the notoriety of its reputation, and it remains a popular byword for the excesses of the witch trials today. And on that happy note, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed, unsuccessfully fallen asleep, if that's what you were using the video for. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.